Hello, my friends. Well, today we're in John chapter 11. And you remember from the previous chapter that the Jews had tried to kill Jesus. And so Jesus escaped across the Jordan and he's out of their clutches. And it's there that he gets the report that his friend Lazarus has a deadly illness. Now, before we look at the miracle, I want to look at the attitude of the disciples because it's one that sometimes we fall into. Let's read verse 8 and 16. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again? Therefore Thomas, who is also called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go there so that we may die with him. Now the disciples, and Thomas in particular, are doubting Jesus' ability to guard over them. These are not heroic words, but these are words of unbelief. In John chapter 17, on the last night of Jesus' life, he said this in high priestly prayer, Father, I was keeping those you gave me in your name, and I guarded them, and not one of them perished, but the son of perdition. And so Jesus is guarding them. Now, while we should never, ever shy away from any persecution that might come our way for following Jesus, we don't ever want to take this attitude, which says that following Christ is a sacrifice. It's a hardship. No, following Christ is a joy. His burden is light, and he's always watching over us. And so if you're going through something, realize he's in control. It's going to be all right. Now, Jesus goes to the tomb, and there he encounters Martha, and he promises her that he will raise her brother from the dead. Let's read verses 23 through 26. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Jesus explains that the resurrection life is for the present as well as the future. The moment we accept Jesus and begin to trust in him, we are living out of that resurrection life. Jesus states here that there are two resurrections. The first is the resurrection from spiritual death, and the second is the resurrection from physical death. Now, eternal life has two dimensions, if you will. We have the already not yet dynamic happening. In other words, we've already received eternal life, but we have not yet received the fullness of that life. Understanding this balance between what we've already received and what we have to wait yet to receive in fullness is really the secret or the great challenge to living this life as Christians today. Now, Martha goes and gets Mary, and then we have this very interesting scene at the tomb, verses 33. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping and the Jews who were weeping, he said, where have they laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. Now you got to wonder, why did Jesus weep? He knew that in just a few moments he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead and he would bring them great joy. But Jesus wept because he entered into their temporary loss and sorrow. God is not aloof from our pain. Even though he knows everything is going to turn out well, he still enters into and experiences our pain and our sorrows and takes it into himself. Now, the Jews misinterpreted Jesus' tears. Listen to what they said in verse 36. So the Jews were saying, see how he loved them. They thought that Jesus' tears were for his own sense of loss, for his own pain, rather than understanding that he wept because of the pain of those who were suffering on that day. And then in verse 37, they really get it wrong. And we read this. But some of them said, could this man who opened the eyes of the blind, could he not have kept this man also from dying? And so they faulted Jesus for allowing this tragedy to happen, not understanding that God often brings the greatest victories out of tragedy. Now, when we doubt God's love because we have to undergo a tragedy, or a sorrow. What we really need to do is just to stand fast in God's comfort and God's present strength until we come to see the victory that God brings. And he brings it through often unexpected ways. Now, next, Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb. And then he does something very interesting. In verse 44, he says, "Unbind him and let him go." Now, this reminds me of the story I taught a while ago about the feeding of the 5,000. God always gives us a part to play. God always allows us to be part of his great work. And even after people get saved today, they still have bindings from past hurts and past mistakes and past lies they believed that we need to help them remove before they can really have the fullness of Christ. And all of us have a part to play in helping others come into the fullness of Christ. Now, I want to talk about two final lessons from this story. The first is that question of why did Jesus delay 2 extra days before coming back? Verse 6, we read it. "So when Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick, he then stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was." Now, the truth is that sometimes God delays his answers so that he can show forth greater glory, so that we'll have a bigger testimony, so that our faith will deepen. It can be harder on us to go through these times, but it always builds greater faith. The second lesson is in the words of Jesus to Martha in her sorrow, in her grieving, and in her loss. Verse 40, he said this, "Jesus said to her, 'Did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?'" Now, this should be a life verse for each one of us. What an encouragement it is to know that no matter what tragedy you may be going through, what setback has hit your life, that there is the promise that you will see the glory of God if we'll just hold on and believe and continue to obey. So often we want to see the glory and the breakthrough first, and then we'll believe. But oftentimes we have to believe first before we can ever see the glory. This is an important verse for these days. Because in this time of darkness and strife, where many hearts are filled with fear and uncertainty and doubt, we can be the light of the world. If we'll just believe these words, if we'll just believe, we'll see the glory of God. We can be an encouragement to everyone around us because of the hope we have in this principle. Did I not say to you that if you would just believe, you would see the glory of God? God has great works he's going to do in our days. And we can be the bridge to help people get over those if we'll just continue to believe. Well, God bless you. What a privilege it's been to share this time with you.